Hey, coffee experts. Those of you running independent coffee shops, you're always looking for ways that you can drop your costs. And we here at the Coffee Experts Club really understand that. And so we've started something called Indie Coffee Coalition. And what it's designed to do is to drop your costs on two of the things that you're probably experiencing the highest sales volume in your store. And that is energy drink and frat mix. Those two line items, we've created our own products and are offering you those products at a reduced cost so that you can cut out the Red Bull of America. You can cut out the main lines of energy drinks that you're doing and serve your own energy drink at a reduced cost on a line item that you're probably already making a lot of sales on anyway. The best way that you can grow sales is by dropping your costs and maintaining a current volume. So check us out at indiecoffee.co and we'll love to tell you more there.
Welcome to the Coffee Experts Club, where we discuss all of the insights, expertise, and drama that goes into making your passion your profession. Our hosts, Aaron, Ben, and Drew, are three coffee experts who have taken their coffee experience and turned it into true expertise. They have consulted with major coffee brands throughout the United States and beyond, providing operations expertise and growth strategy for drive-thru openings, multiple locations, and everything in between. So brew yourself a cup and hang out a bit with the Coffee Experts Club.
Yeah, we missed you, dude. Me and Ben were like, we've talked about everything that we know. We don't know any more things. Let's get Drew back in here.
One thing that has changed is the formatting here inside of StreamYard. So that was what I was commenting on as we jumped into the call.
I love it. Yeah, StreamYard. Shameless plug. Use StreamYard and our affiliate promo code as you sign up. Coffee experts, thanks for joining us, man. Great to be back with you guys again. Drew, I will say it is lonely in here without you, though. It's nice to have you round out the room. Me and Ben, just the old guys. We need some of the young blood in here, even though your beard, when it gets like this, starts making you look older and be a little more Amish or Mennonite, which is what we're going for in Belize. You know what I'm saying? Oh, man. Anyway, so coffee experts, we thought we would talk about today a trend we're seeing that's going on right now in Starbucks, because I think that as much as we want to take pot shots at them and talk about how we don't like their coffee and it's burnt, or talk about all the different things that we talk about, but we like to take pot shots at, I do think that they are a front runner of a lot of dollars when it comes to dollars of investment coming from data on changes they're making in trend. I think they're always a good one to be a lead indicator of things that thought space, at least in that space, of more dollars than probably all of us listening to this combined times a billion. Like they're sitting on a bunch of cash. So let's look at them. And then let's also talk about a debatable subject that Joe Moody and I are going to arm wrestle about on this call. I'm pretty excited about it. Ben Clatter, let's talk cafes. Do you want to kick off the frame of the conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I think biggest frame, especially since, we come at it from primarily and heavy-handedly drive-through coffee, and a lot of our clients and a lot of our locations they're drive-through only. But recently Starbucks has been making a big push to get back to their cafe roots. I don't know of too many, if any, Starbucks locations are just drive-thrus, drive-through stands like we're used to seeing, but they're making a big push to get back to OG Starbucks, the OG cafe feel, the in-house mugs, the faster in-house lines. They're pushing for a 4-minute service time in their inside cafes.
Wow.
Trying to get back to more simplified menus inside, basically making that, I don't know if anybody remembers, I worked at Starbucks back in 2006, 20 years ago now almost.
Crazy, Ben. 20 years ago. That was the original OG Benji.
That was, wow. That's what kicked off the coffee career. But back then, Starbucks was the place to go. Like, if you weren't at work, you weren't at home, you would go to Starbucks. Like, you'd work, you'd hang out, you'd go there for fun, and you'd have people there for hours. And they've definitely gotten away from that, but they've seen about a 7 to 10% decline in cafe sales over the last year. So obviously it's important to get back to it, which prompted the question of, if you, like us, are heavily invested in drive-through stands, when is a good time? How is a good time to say, hey, let's open a cafe? Is there a good time? Is there not a good time? I guess that's the biggest question.
And I think obviously to frame this up, if you're just tuning in for the first time, if you've never joined us here on Coffee Experts Club, like I would say, we've got a great masterclass out there. It's called My First Drive-Thru.Coffee is where you find the URL for the masterclass, where we take you through all the ins and outs of what we think you should be thinking about drive-thru. Drive-thru is something we really emphasize in Coffee Experts Academy. If you've never checked that out, coffeeexpertsacademy.com. 35 modules of content where we take you into the belly of the beast on how you should be thinking about your coffee shop and building it. And we give you a ton of free tools things we've used for building big names out there, BlackRock, Human Being, and a lot of independents. But this whole question about drive-thru versus cafe is a little bit contentious between us on this call because Drew is continually leaning one way. And Drew, for those of you who don't know, Drew and I are business partners. We have the first drive-thru coffee in the country of Belize. And we always go back and forth on, is now the time? Is it not the time? Should we do cafes? Should we not do cafes? So I think that this is a great time for us to talk about it and for you to have we just need a little marital counseling, Ben. We need you to lean in and walk with me and Drew to make it through this and navigate it well.
It's not so much us going, isn't it the time? Is it the time? Should we? Shouldn't? It's one of us going, it's the time, and one of us going, we should, and one of us going, no, we shouldn't.
So Drew, you go first. I'll let you go first because I'll prefer you.
I'm a diehard cafe guy for so many reasons. And I mean, I'll state my case.
State your case and tell us a little bit of your background, because I think your background lends itself to why, right? Because you were the manager of the largest cafe for Roasters, right? That's where we're all born out of. And I think that it's important for people to hear it. Yeah, at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I started at what then became the largest cafe at Roasters. We called it Road 68, which we had a drive-thru and we had a cafe. And I mean, I loved the dynamic of getting to spend time with my customers, getting to know my customers without the constraint of drive-thru service times, which we all want to be incredibly fast. You know, from my perspective, it was limiting because we have various customers who prefer not to be chatted with, who prefer a minute time service time. They'll have customers who, like Ben said, want to come in for a long time, drinks, chat with other customers, come chat with, the baristas. And I solely managed cafes, managed 3 or 4 different cafes in my experience there, and then went on to actually work with the managers of just drive-through locations. And so I did get to see both sides of things. One huge reason that I would lean into cafes is the community aspect. You have to be in the right kind of a town for that, the right kind of clientele for that. So first of all, you do need to know your customers. We had cafes in certain areas that didn't do nearly as well as cafes in other areas. It was the same business. We sold the same product, the same brand, the same type of customer service. It was just about location. But what lends itself to, the success of Roasters was the community aspect. And that might be why I'm so, let's lean into cafes, because you get so much more opportunity to market to those people. You get people coming in for their Sunday running group. You have older groups coming in and knitting or having reading groups. Or we had somebody I think they got married and came there right afterwards and celebrated in our lobby. So there's all of these amazing things. I think it was at Road 68.
Yeah.
There's all these just amazing memories that I have as a barista, being a part of the customer experiencing our business. I wasn't even the customer, but I was there serving them, seeing their happiness, seeing the camaraderie, seeing it was them creating this environment in our business that lent itself to so many other people seeing that joy and getting to experience it secondhand. And I remember sitting in the lobby one time with Jarek of Richland, I believe, and we were interviewing a gentleman named Dante. And Jarek and I got up and hugged for some reason. I don't remember why we came and hugged. And like a year later, Dante let me know, he's like, I knew at that moment, I saw you guys happy and giving hugs. I work for this business, So like all of this, we don't even know is happening within our cafes, the secondhand experiences, the customers that have their own stories within the business.
Isn't Dante still hooked into that thing? Didn't we run into Dante as working at the old Resilient that now is a BlackRock? Isn't that who we ran into?
No, that was.
Anyways,
it was like 5 seconds we were in there. I'll remember if he moved to Flying X, I think. I don't know if he's still doing it. He was really invested in the food side of things. Yeah. But I say all that to say, I'm a huge advocate for the experience it creates for the customer. I think that a drive-through experience can tend to be kind of limited. There's tons of benefits just to drive-through, but that's going to be Aaron's stating his case.
So Ben, you should give us commentary on what Drew just said, because I think you're a good middle between me and Drew, because my things are going to be all financial. And that's the difference, right? Drew is all relational, right? Because Drew has the time spent in that spot, where my time is largely spent in the bigger picture of books and numbers and what justifies and pain in the asses that come out of like cafes. And so Ben, I think you're a good, what is it?
Non-biased mediator.
That's right. That's it right there. Yes. So give us your commentary on Drew's thoughts.
I'll probably say that no matter what both of you say, I'll agree with both of you. I completely agree with.
So political, Ben, manager president. I love it.
No, I mean, I completely agree with everything Drew said. Cafes are a huge marketing arm for your brand if you're a coffee shop. I always call them anchors. And I always liked, having 3 to 4 drive-throughs and adding a cafe as an anchor in a location because it just anchors you with that community. And that community kind of, if you've got a well-established brand that is loved by your fans, they now have a beacon that they can go to and spend their time at. Just like Drew said, I remember I loved all of our customers who I'd get to know, and then they'd come inside and I'm like, oh, these are all your kids. This is your family. And you create that relationship. So I completely agree with Drew. I think from that side of it, I mean, I remember multiple locations. We'd have surrounding area businesses, banks would come inside, a representative of theirs, give us their credit card and say, hey, the next 100 people who come through, let us buy their coffee. And they would just stand inside and hand out like pamphlets for their business. And everybody would be stoked about it. Good business to business relationship, good business to community marketing. And a lot of that only really happens when you have a cafe.
I love it. I love it. And then, so now as I state my case, those of you members of the jury, as we talk about what my point is on it, let me say this out of the gates is I agree with Drew for the feel good of what you just talked about, and even for the marketing opportunity that Ben just highlighted. I think that cafes are great for both of those things. And there is an energy that comes out of a cafe that's really, really hard to replicate at a drive-thru. And we're experiencing that even in Belize, right? Because as much as I can shit talk cafes, our first location shares some similarities of cafes in that it's a walk-up, not a drive-thru. And the reason we did that was because it's the main thoroughfare in the town, right? It's the second largest town in the city, in the country of Belize, right? San Ignacio. But when it comes to traffic, the highest traffic count that we could find was actually foot traffic over car traffic when it came to opening our first location. So we chose to open up this walk up very much like a drive-through. We still positioned it the same way. So all the workflows work just like a drive-through. You're still putting coffee out the window, quote unquote, across the bar the same way that you would if you were in a drive-through. And we trained all of our kids the same way because we didn't want to get into a pattern of we were training them like we would train them for a cafe. We always knew that drive-through is our model. This just happened to be the best traffic count, was a foot traffic count, therefore lending itself to walk up. So, but it has turned into more of a cafe. Drew finally got his way. We pushed the wall back a little bit. We created an inside seating area. So it does have some cafe feel to it now. We've talked about a lot how the baristas at San Ignacio, we call it Burns. That's the street it's on. The baristas at Burns know their customers a lot better than the baristas at San Pedro South, as we get ready to open up San Pedro North, right? So we've had a lot of conversations, and that's because we don't offer a lot of like hang time, right? We're trying to train our kids to quick window time, right? So when you're trying to do quick window time, 1 to 2 minutes, how much dialogue are you going to get? And then when you don't let them linger, you don't get that face time. Whereas Burns, they get a lot more lingering time because they're sitting in the cafe as the kids are walking through, doing cleanup, as they're out there watering the plants. There's conversation time that you just don't get from a drive up. So I totally get the relational piece, which I think is key. One of our quarterly rocks has been Operation Own This Town. And that is like, we want relationally to build relationships where we are the hometown hero. I think that was one of Roasters' greatest strengths is they established themselves as indie, right? If you're an independent listening to this, you've got a competitive edge over the franchises, right? Because people don't love supporting big corporate franchise, not in this generation, right? And so if you can nail down hometown hero, do it, right? Because it's very hard for a franchisee or a corporate entity to nail down that same hometown hero. So I get it. And this is where I'm going to push back.
Hey, experts, we've got something really awesome that we do here at Coffee Experts Club, and that's called the My First Drive-Thru Coffee Masterclass. So if you're opening your next coffee shop, I think a lot of times you may think to yourself, I know what goes into opening a coffee shop. I've been doing this for years, but maybe you've been doing it for somebody else. And maybe this is your first option of starting a coffee shop on your own. Or maybe you don't know anything about coffee and you're just like, I'm looking for a good investment opportunity. Starting a coffee shop seems like a good place to put it, and you're going to enter into it. But what you don't know is all the things that you don't know, right? And so what we've done with this masterclass is taken behind the scenes, how you find your first location, what you need to be thinking about in finding a location. We give you a gift in the masterclass where it's a step-by-step process of how you're opening your coffee shop, the different checkpoints you need from coming up with your plans and talking with the city and then negotiating a lease. And then how do you build a team and what are the different pieces you need to be thinking about? It's a great masterclass, door to door, start to finish, completely free on opening up your next coffee drive-thru. So check it out. It's at myfirstdrivethru.coffee, and it's a great masterclass. You won't regret it. We'll see you on the inside there.
it's very, very difficult to make a cafe pencil the same way you can make a drive-through pencil. So let's also say some things to qualify things. If you're listening and maybe some of this language is new for you, we would never justify a cafe without a drive-through. Like we would always advocate
Yep.
for, you need a drive-through window, even if you have seating interior, which is what we would call a cafe, only because drive times, right? The whole goal of coffee, the way we do it is, how many cups can we turn per minute, right?
Mm.
The biggest suck in a cafe is me. I'll walk in and I'll order an Americano black, right? Cheapest thing that you can find on the freaking menu. And I will leech off of you for the next 6 to 8 hours when I'm traveling abroad, right? So let's say I'm out traveling. Listen, I love cafes. Let me tell you why I love cafes. I need someplace quiet I can sit down and steal internet, right? So I sit down, I steal internet, I buy your cheapest cup of coffee, I use your restroom multiple times, right? Because I'm filling up on caffeine that I need to go hit the head, right? So I'm using your restroom. It takes more of your staff to service, right? Because it's a bigger space for you to have to sweep and clean and deal with customers out there, right? I know that we get the love of the customer, but the flip side of that is all the drama that customers bring, right? So it's a bigger space that you have to build, right? We're talking about more square footage is needed when you're going to open a cafe. There's no way around that, right? You need the square footage for people to be able to sit in. That's also more square footage you have to run utilities to, right? So power, air conditioning, right? You now have to provide a bathroom for people, right? When it comes to, if people are going to sit in your cafe, they have to have some place you can use restroom, which means more cleaning for your staff. And not only cleaning for your staff, but there are disgusting things that happen in bathrooms that you make available to the public. I can tell you terrible stories that Jarek would tell us, and I'm not even going to bring him up on this call, of having to unseat women's toilets to deal with things that were stuck down the pipes. Yeah, I mean, like things that are just awful pain points that you don't want to have to deal with. You get rid of all of that when you just don't let people in your house, right? Like, I don't bring people to my house because I don't want to deal with people. You know what I mean? But like, there is that whole side of it where it's just, if you're talking about efficiency and cost, like there's no argument to drive-throughs are just so much more efficient. I can staff less people. I have to pay less in overhead costs. It costs me less to build it. Like it's usually, that's an easier square footage. We've talked about a lot. Is there an old business in our town that has too much parking? They grandfathered into too much parking that we could go do a simple land lease, rough in some utilities out there, drop our little stand on the corner. That's much harder to do when you're talking a cafe because it's a bigger footprint. So
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of efficiency things that I'm like, man, can we not? Like Drew always tells me that's exactly how it goes. Hey, I think it's time to have a cafe. And I'm like, just, can we not though? Could we just not? Because like, there's the part of me where it's like, man, I get it, but man, I don't get it. So it's an interesting, I will say what you said, Ben, is key. And maybe you can speak to it a little bit, is the reason why we say after 3 or 4 is because it starts to turn into, we could actually get a twofer out of this. It's not only the opportunity for to connect with the community, but we also can build in more storage area, right? Because usually the hard piece that you have with the tiny little square footage you get on a drive-through is it's tiny little footage you get out of a drive-through, right? Like there's all kinds of storage problems. So maybe Ben, do you want to speak to my comments and then maybe tack in where the benefit is at 3 or 4?
Yeah, I mean, again, the same with you. I completely agree. Cafes in every degree of operations and finances are more of a headache. They are just more difficult. They cost more. They staff more. Everything about them is more difficult and requires more time and more energy. Their profit margins are typically smaller. If you've got a banger drive-through, we had a drive-through stand that was consistently doing as good, if not better, than our 2 top-tier cafes sometimes. And that's not even just, I guess, just a revenue. That's not a profit margin.
Yeah. I would say like revenue and profit margin, though, right, Ben? Because there were some, you could say this because you and I looked at this way more than Drew looked at this back in the day, because his role was so functional, right? Drew is so freaking good at operations on the ground, but Ben and I were looking at operations from above. And there were some stores, like I think of West Richland, Ben, it was like not a banger at top line, but kicked freaking ass at profitability. Their profitability percentage was much higher than even our highest grossing stores for like profitability, even though their gross wasn't as high. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, no. So I mean, and that's where the headache and the financials are what usually has always led me to say 3 or 4 drive-throughs per cafe, because When it comes to the financial side of things, your profitability, if you have 3 or 4 banger drive-throughs, that affords you to take that sort of profitability hit, even though it's not really a hit, a lower profitability margin percentage on your cafe. If I've got three drive-throughs who are cranking out, high percentages when it comes to my actual bottom line, then I can afford a cafe. That cafe also helps offset some marketing costs for me. That cafe also helps offset some of my training needs. If I have a cafe with a backup machine in the back, well, then now I'm not like struggling and hurting my drive-through times, hurting my times at my drive-through stands. I can instead train in the back of my cafe, and it opens up my drive-throughs to just be pumping out coffee. So once you get to that 3 or 4 drive-through stand point, I think the pros and cons start to kind of level out, because now I'm not worried about my profit because I've got those stands doing great. This cafe can kind of slowly get more and more busy as my drive-through stands hold me when it comes to my profitability. Operationally, sure, it's more staffing, but if I've got a big enough space, I can staff and train in that location before having to hurt what's going on in the bar for my drive-throughs and for my current shop. I can keep them in the back and I can train them there. And then I'm ready. I can push them out in front of the customers. So, and then of course, all of this is to say that you've got a great location and it's the right time for you. I would never advocate that just because you have 3 drive-throughs, you need to go and just wedge a cafe in there somewhere. We learned that. We opened up cafes that were worse than most of our drive-throughs and worse than other cafes, because we were like, yeah, this is a good spot like for a cafe, like Drew said. And we're like, no, that's a horrible, horrible spot for a cafe. So if you have a good location and you're able to build and do a location or locations pre-built or vanilla shell for you, that's big enough to have people in it, it's big enough to sort of fit some storage and some training, then your trade-offs are getting a little more even. And you get the added cherry on top of, okay, now I've created a community anchor for my brand that's going to sort of, like I said, be that beacon of marketing for my brand to my already raving fans.
I mean, there's no way around it. And Drew, I'd love to hear your thoughts on those things. I think that there's no way around a lot of the things you just mentioned are not things you're going to see on your financials, right? So like you have to factor that stuff in. There are some intangibles that, and as long as you have other stores that are kicking ass and taking names, you might want to think about how much do we equate now those intangibles to things that are really important for our business. Yeah, it's not going to look good on the bottom line, but there are a lot of intangibles that aren't ever going to hit our bottom line that are actually value adds that we need in this season of business.
I think it's hard to quantify a lot of the effects of dealing with just people. You know what I mean? Like we're people oriented business, and people don't really make it onto the spreadsheets. They don't make it on the P&Ls. We don't know what those people are feeling and how much of that feeling is actually adding towards them going to their family, them going to their friends, bringing people to our stores. We had, as you mentioned in past calls, clients do free drinks for the grand openings because instead of spending thousands of dollars on marketing, they're spending a couple thousand giving free drinks away, and that is the marketing. And I think a lot of the intangibles on number-oriented success comes from the people. And the only way to really know what the effect would have been on Roasters would have been to erase those cafes from the history of Roasters experience. But I mean, I can advocate for people coming in, as you said, with their kids, and seeing their kids, over the time that I was there, come in and bring in, their friends and relatives, and eventually their own children would grow up, and you got generational customers. And, you can look at that from our perspective, and that is a beautiful, training the next generation of customers, providing those, human experiences. So I could speak to the intangible about it all day, and that's kind of been my whole side of things, but I think we've pretty much well rounded off the argument to that.
Hey, I met my wife working at a coffee cafe. Well, you can't put that on the spreadsheet.
You're welcome, gentlemen. Excellent conversation. Coffee experts, I hope you enjoyed that this week, and consider where you're at in your business when you think about cafe versus drive-thru opening your next location. We'll see you next week here on Coffee Expert Club. Thank you, boys.
Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who are looking to become a coffee expert yourself, we offer an incredible, thorough training online for opening your first coffee drive-thru at www.myfirstdrivethru.coffee.